Hello, welcome to SocTalk with JNAB and the Sundance Kid. We are going to explore the frontiers of technology, art, and the human experience. Hello everybody, welcome to SocTalk, episode 4. We threatened last time to potentially talk about cinema and film. Now, because of that, we thought this would be a fantastic opportunity to have our first guest, and we've done that. So here we have Nicci Thompson. Nicci, introduce yourself.
Hey, oh, thank you. That's kind. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. My name's Nicci Thompson. I'm a lecturer in the School of Creative and Cultural Business, where I kind of teach kind of film, media, screenwriting, bits of marketing, and so on and so on. I'm also co-founder, director of Crow House Projects and Crow House Films with yourself. My background is filmmaking, screenwriting, and storytelling. Various degrees have always been based around film, history of film, and so on. And I've been lucky enough to live in the US and make some films, make some projects over there. I got my degree over there, and always looking and making fun, cool stories.
Good.
I'm waffling now already.
No, you're in very good company, as you know. As you well know, it's not like we've never talked before. So today we thought we'll give ourselves a general topic to kind of go over, and we thought it would be interesting to look at some of the history of cinema and specifically how concepts and ideas have changed over time just through techniques and technology and methods. So if we go all the way back to Miles.
All the way back.
All the way back. One of my absolute all-time heroes as a VFX fan, because he was an absolute groundbreaker in terms of technologies and techniques. Have you ever seen the one where he takes off his head?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so he takes off his head, he plops it down over there, and he was doing double exposure, masking off bits of film and then refilming again, double exposure, which is early methods of compositing and techniques and whatnot.
Yeah, from back in the day when it was actually compositing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, instead of just digitally faking that you were compositing.
Yep. And if you watch A Trip to the Moon, it's absolutely fantastic. And the sets, the paintings, the forced perspective, it's all absolute genius. But what's interesting, with all this genius level of filmmaking and innovation, he never once thought to move the camera, which is crazy to me. Like you can, sometimes you have no idea some of the simple things that are restricting you in some ways.
No, it's true. And I mean, Méliès, for what he did for film, he's the probably the first storyteller of film, building of worlds, Georges Méliès. And what he did with his kind of studio and over 100 films, I think he did, and just unbelievable kind of vision to kind of tell stories. But you're right, it was like theatre. It was a fixed lens theatre, choreographed movement, changing of set, changing of backdrop, and so on and so on. But then when they learned about moving the camera, it kind of changed the whole dynamic with like something, the Great Train Robbery and various things like that we're able to kind of do.
Wings.
Yeah. We were talking about that.
Yeah, we're literally referencing Wings.
Crazy.
We're
actually going to build a shot around Wings.
Yeah.
Because Scorsese did it with Hugo. Ironically, it's a story about Georges Méliès. Hugo is a phenomenal piece of work. Scorsese says it's a film for filmmakers, but it's for anyone wanting to learn more about it and how that kind of storytelling lent itself through generations of other artists. Yeah.
Nicely put. I have a question for you both.
Cool.
I'm a fan of the genre myself, but my opinions of the history of film changed when I read Bendazzi's book, Cartoons, 100 Years of Animation. Did you ever see that? Came out in 1994 in Italy, and then a few years later an English translation. Years ago when I was asked to repair for those of you listening, that was air quotes, repair an animation school, and just try to fix a few things that were suffering there. One of the things I did was to introduce a mandatory history of animation course, and I managed to get Bendazzi's book. Bendazzi traces it back and shows how animation predates film.
Yeah.
and how the moving picture really started with that, because of what's his name, the fellow who wrote the Thesaurus, Roget,
Oh, okay.
who talked about the persistence of motion, and that when you what you're really seeing is still pictures, but we create an illusion in our brain that they're moving. And that was sort of the beginning of the whole thing. You talked about wagon wheels, how when they start turning at a certain speed, they appear to be going backwards because they're turning faster than you can see. And all of a sudden, everybody was doing cutout animation and personal projectors and group projectors, the beginning of what led to the Méliès and the Lumière brothers and all of them. So to me, all of that sort of predates film. And it's very controlled when you're doing animation about the perspective you want people to see from. You control that. So I wonder, do you think really that he never thought to move the camera, as you said? Or do you think he thought about it and decided it was too hard?
It was definitely a lot harder back then if you see the cameras.
Yeah.
If you see the cameras, that's where technology opened it up a lot as well.
Sure, when you see the cameras, but also the setups he was doing for the compositing.
Of course, the perspective would change.
Yes, forced perspective. I mean, all of that was, everything was dependent on a linear optical illusion.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess he was also a magician as well. So he understood very well that where your audience is looking is very, very important. So having your audience go and move around definitely changes things up.
Well, before,
everybody, one hand is bigger than the other.
but before he did, I think the camera that he created was a cinematograph. Yeah. But before he did that, talking about moving image, the first thing he did before all that was the carousels. So he had these carousels in parts of circuses. They were treated like peep shows. You spent a penny or whatever, and you went in to look, and these things would spin, and it would be horses galloping. And that was before he moved into the kind of creating the camera and the moving image. But even when the first camera came out, it was actually treated as a form of, it was more for observing and even for medicine, for human movement. Because it was, the first images was people walking upstairs or walking from one side to the other, so on and so on. So
it was one guy who took all those photographs.
Yeah, it's
one madman.
Was it? Yeah. So
absolutely.
It's
and literally a madman. Do you know the story of that? Why there were
please.
sequential images of a running horse?
No.
So that there were these two guys running for governor of California. I believe it was governor of California.
This was the bet, wasn't it?
Yes. And so one of them said in a speech, as certainly as a running horse must keep one foot on the ground at all time, you want stable government, or some ridiculous comment like that. And the other guy said, running horses have all feet in the air at some point, and it became a big debate. So one of them hired this photographer to figure out how can you take photos of every step a horse is taking and all of the points in between. So they got this man who was much more crazy than anyone realized at the time to set up triggers that would go off, and he put cameras, sequential cameras, one after the other on the posts of a fence on a racing track. And as the horse ran past, cameras were triggered automatically one after the other. So that sequence that you were describing of the running horse, that came from him doing that. He became so famous for that as a participant in winning I think it was a $5,000 bet for a politician against his rival. That he started getting calls for doing other things. And that's where the art studies came from. He did a lot of stuff of naked men and women walking, standing, striking different poses just to capture motion. He also, just as another side note inside my side note, if you watch any animation at all of birds flying, or if you were ever trained to animate a bird flying, like I was a billion years ago, it looks, if you really look at it, it looks like the wings are going backwards. And this forward stroke. I mean, like they're stroking forwards instead of backwards. So it looks like they're doing the reverse of what you'd expect. The reason for that, his photos. Because in order to capture the movement of a bird's wings, he put bait down on the ground.
Oh, so they were slowing down.
So they were slowing down when he captured them. And the result is everybody who used his photos for references, which every animator did, and I think to some degree still does. Certainly when I was training for it, everybody used his photos. You're capturing a bird slowing down and treating it as though it's animation of a bird flying alone. And he eventually killed his wife. And
it's a nice turn there.
Such is the history of film and animation. He killed his wife and was found not guilty because of reason of insanity.
Literal madman then.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Well, okay. Speaking of
Long digression
talk,
ending
talk.
with murder.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a movie there. Why have I not seen that movie yet?
There, yeah. Anyway, okay, if we go through time, well, even before then, if we think about photography as well, I was just recently coming up with history of virtual reality as well, and that going back and thinking about stereographic imagery. Basically, as soon as people figured out cameras, they also figured out take two pictures, look at them both, and you'll get depth perception, which is, we think as though people put their headsets on and they're like, oh yeah, we do two images, blah, blah, blah. It's ancient as well.
This is going into Lawnmower Man, is it?
Not yet. We'll get there. But yeah, okay, so let's go forward through time. People start moving cameras, and a lot of it is, okay, we're talking about technology, big clunky camera, hard to move. People are literally turning the reels to maintain the speed. That's why a lot of early cinemas speeds up and slows down, is because the person's arm's getting sore turning the crank. No, this is where doing a little bit of research beforehand would have helped. I'm not sure when mechanized film reel motors kicked in.
Well, according to the Flintstones.
Yeah.
So there's probably a Simpson episode about that, because the Simpsons are never wrong, are they?
No, ever.
Let's just jump forward in time to what we want to talk about. Nicci, you were wanting to talk about specific elements of time.
Okay.
Or not.
Go for it, John.
Go.
No, I like the idea of talking about when the equipment got mechanized, because that's a huge step.
Yeah.
Like you say, that makes a standard,
Yes.
right? But I don't know either when film cameras first got mechanized.
Well, the standard quickly became 24 frames per second.
Right.
That's when everybody, at least figured out 24 frames per second. There's a caveat to that. So long as for each of those 24th of a second, the shutter is open. If the shutter is not open, it's jerky and jolty, and it won't look right. So that's why when a lot of computer
your
screens
eyes are trained to. That's what your eyes are.
Well, it's also with video games. When people got video games and everyone was trained that you only need 24 frames per second, if there's no motion blur, it doesn't work. But you get natural motion blur when the shutter is open for 24th of a second.
Because the video games were doing 8 or 12 or 16 frames a second instead of 24 at first.
Okay, I'm specific. I've jumped to 3D video games. I've jumped to 3D video games. But yeah.
They did that. There's lovely stuff about the history of that too, which is quite fun. So when you watch an old black and white film and it looks like everybody's moving at double speed,
Yes.
that's because they couldn't crank at that speed, right? The inconsistency of it is exactly what you were saying. But the fact that it's uniformly faster when we look at it today is because the people who re-recorded those films for television were capturing them at a rate of 24 frames per second when they were actually shot at about 18 or 12.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
That just naturally speeds them up.
I seem to remember something about the Kid, Charlie Chaplin, being the first camera that there was something changed.
Automated camera.
I think it was something around the Chaplin era, because it was the first automated camera, obviously predated sound,
Right.
which was Chaplin. And what was that, like mid-30s?
The Kid, 34, 33.
Well, any kind of Chaplin was in his heyday kind of through the 30s and then through the war, obviously with the dictator, and so on and so on. And that's when sound kind of kicked into it.
Well, yeah, that's a whole interesting dimension to talk about, thinking about opening a whole new dimension to an art form.
Well, it was the artist that did that movie. The artist, was that not about the first
The artist,
talk?
yeah, absolutely. They showed the transition, though so does Singing in the Rain.
Of course.
Yes.
If you remember the classic film. Yeah. So, Hollywood loves to tell stories about itself, right? They say every story you see in a Hollywood film is actually a story about something that happened in Hollywood.
Yes.
Just occasionally they admit it, like in Singing in the Rain. It's the artist. The artist is a brilliant film.
Oh, yeah.
Nice reference.
Yeah.
So is The Kid.
Yeah.
The Kid launched the career of Jackie Coogan, right? Who was a professional actor for 70-something years. Like, that's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, it's just one of those beautiful stories where Chaplin did what no one else was doing. Buster Keaton to a lesser degree, Harold Lloyd to a lesser degree, telling an emotional story. Chaplin just broke your heart. Just broke your heart. It's really beautifully done.
It's where it. I was watching an older clip of Spielberg talking about how he feels saddened that there's a wave of people growing up on him, which is me. I grew up on Spielberg and influenced by him a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And it's any art form, any artist will say the same thing as well. It's like look to who inspired your inspirations and go far down as you can, and you'll really start learning what's most important. And of course, with everything we're talking about with film, the most important thing is story and storytelling. It's ultimately a continuation since the first campfires. That's how far back.
I agree.
You just stole my line, man.
Oh, did he? Nice.
I mean, Nicci's got a pitch about our filmmaking company, and this is part of our pitch as we start.
Nice. Okay.
Well, listen, you know, there's people right now up there in the cosmos, astronauts, there because they grew up watching Star Trek.
Hell yeah.
You know?
Hell yeah.
There's doctors that are saving lives in ER because they loved Grey's Anatomy when they were teenagers. And it has that, it's cheesy pie, and I know that, but that's what we rely on Jamie are laughing at. But it's so true. I mean, the stories of characters and worlds inspire, because it's pop culture media, it's what we grew up on. And it inspires and instills a belief about wanting to do something with your life. And it can change. It can change your world. It can change your life wholeheartedly. Beautiful. And I think that there's no, I mean, I'm not saying there's no, because I know music does do this to people too. Of course there is. But film is such a powerful way of inspiring and delivering meanings and messages and commentary and perceptions in the world. And I think we're talking about Chaplin. I mean, Chaplin, the commentaries he delivered in some of his kind of early works, that when it kind of broke into proper narrative and story, trailblazer, trailblazer. And absolutely. For me, my favorite, which was one of the kind of main shift, and we can talk about the technological advancements, you know, constantly. You're the better person for speaking about that than I am. For me, I think, in looking at cinema, it's not about the technical advancements. For me, it's about the story advancements and the genres and the kind of shift. And we're going through a really fun time right now, which we'll get to. I'm not going to jump ahead. But
we'll drag you back.
I know. But when we're talking about the Chaplin era, kind of going into the dictator and that kind of storytelling, my favorite, one of my favorite kind of waves of cinema was film noir. Is film noir, still is. It's constantly being reimagined. And Billy Wilder, Double Indemnity.
Anything by Billy Wilder.
That movie, that Double Indemnity, specifically that movie, changed the landscape of filmmaking, I think, 100%. Because that's at times referenced the first ever film noir film. And what happened was, it was 1944 it came out, so it was made during the war. And during that time, like kind of 5-6 years of back and forth, obviously kind of trading was all over the place. Kind of Europe, the cultural cinema hub, which was, I believe it was France at the time, they couldn't see each other's work because of the war. And then once Double Indemnity was made, Billy Wilder made Double Indemnity with Fred Macaulay, etc., etc. And that film had a really different perspective. And when it got out, the French says, oh my gosh, what's happened to the Americans? This is so dark. This is so, I mean, not just visually, but aesthetically, it's so dark. It's so cynical. It's noir. It's film noir. And you know, that's obviously referencing the kind of shadowy darkness as well as the kind of characters, because for one of the first times it was an anti-hero. It was, our protagonist was a person doing bad things, making wrong decisions, getting caught up in things they shouldn't have, where it was centralized in crime. And I think that had such an influence in, like,
you're also talking about the shift into postmodernist.
Yes, exactly. An influence into everything else. New wave as well. Yeah. Italian neorealism, one of my favorite genres. But I'll stop there before I...
No.
I would like to back up a bit.
Yeah, please.
Not to not talk about those things, but just to say that there's another thing that happens at the same time as the storytelling, which is the technical innovations that change the way that you can tell the stories, the ways that you can evoke the emotions involved. So if you'll pardon my stepping back just a little bit from
Oh, go for it.
the new wave and the film noir, back to the original storytellers around the campfire.
Oh yeah, all the way back.
Yeah, just a little ways. 40,000 and 60,000 years, something like that. If you look at the cave paintings, common from Neanderthal times and around then, the call it Neolithic, Mesolithic sort of times, they tend to have animal figures that are painted in more than one color, but over top of each other. And when I was studying anthropology, it occurred to me one day, and I mentioned it at a forum, and was laughed at because it was ridiculous. If you were to look at these animal figures by the flickering light of a fire, which is changing in hue according to temperature, so sometimes the flame is orange and sometimes it's yellow, then the two different drawings would appear and disappear, and you would have animation. Because the deer is there with its legs in one position, and
I'm visualizing it. I see that.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody talk about that except me. And I'm pretty sure it's
Jackie, get a fire made in here. Get some crayons. let's put this to them.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's pretty much what has to happen. And I think there's probably a stage in cave painting where they change from doing single colors at a time to saying, no, look, we can animate these characters, right? Will we ever see that? I don't know. I can't say it's a theory because there's no way to test it, but it's just an observation.
Is there no way to test it?
Yeah,
Still light a fire and it's...
Oh, we can test whether it works.
Yeah.
We can't test whether or not somebody did it 60,000 years ago. Right? So
that's really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Really interesting that. Yeah.
So the technological changes have always been a part of telling a better story.
Yes.
Or telling a good story in a better way. And maybe the two are kind of mixed together. Talking about technical innovations at the time of Chaplin, if you've ever seen his film, The Circus,
of course,
there's a scene in that just had people screaming in the theaters, where he's walking back and forth underneath a swinging sledgehammer. Right? The guy's driving the stake into the ground, and he's stepping across it and getting. They filmed that backwards.
That's right.
So he told the actor, no, you got to do this, lift it up with all of your might. And they practice it and practice it and practice it. He was never in danger.
Yeah.
But it looked on the film as though he was risking his life in a Harold Lloyd kind of way, instead of hanging from a clock tower running across the top.
The train removing the stick.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sit in front of the city. Yeah.
Right. So Harold Lloyd was really risking his life when the front of the house falls down and he's perfectly lined up with the upstairs window.
Yeah.
Right. Chaplin did it by reversing the film. A point of genius for which I don't think he gets enough credit. He also did the roller skating scene in the store where he blindfolds himself.
Yep.
Roller skates.
That's right. That's one of the first examples of. I use it when I'm talking about with the VFX module because it's the concept of layering different things, and that's when they get the glass in front of the camera and paint on matte painting. That's where matte painting comes from. It's literally painting onto glass in front of the camera.
Amazing, right? And you watch the film, and because you've grown up watching films and you've spent the last 5 years watching films, you know what you're seeing, and he has deceived you in order to make a more compelling story. I love that. The same kind of thing was happening when we went into film noir. There are techniques in film noir videography that nobody wanted to risk before.
Lighting especially.
Oh, man. So much beautiful work with lighting, but also things like the POV shaky cam.
That's right, yeah. Right. They, even the Dutch angle, I think, at times, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you think of the film DOA.
DOA,
where the fellow starts the film waking up and he's been poisoned, and he's got 24 or 48 hours to live with the poison in his system. They did a remake with Dennis Quaid in the starring role in the 1980s that's equally good.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But the idea then, we're going to see how shaken up he is because we're going to see the world from his perspective.
Exactly. That's a great example of a whole concept, a method to start implementing and using as storytelling. And that's where genre ends up being built in the first place. Absolutely. Is all of these methods and tools and techniques, and people get trained on them over time.
If you look at film noir and you look at, like, a few years later, you look at Orson Welles, and you look specifically at Touch of Evil. You seen Touch of Evil?
I have not.
So Touch of Evil, what year was Touch of Evil?
We've not seen it. We're not gonna
I hate the fact that for the law for this is we're not allowed to do research because I'm getting dates wrong. Double check what Touch of Evil was.
You can do research the next time you come on.
I'm allowed to.
We will just mock you for it.
Well, we like to be wildly informed and confidently say things as we're
Well,
talking.
I prefer that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Does
there it is.
that say 58?
58.
58, okay, yeah. So, good, right? So,
Thank you, Jackie.
10, 15 years after, Double Indemnity, you look at Orson Welles. Orson Welles, absolute genius. Genius. So you had a film, Touch of Evil, which I think won the Oscar. The opening scene of that movie, right? We're talking about kind of technical and using the camera, using lighting as a way to kind of inspire audience and think, right? So the start of that movie starts with a close-up of a bomb. And this is where the whole bomb mechanism kind of story comes from when you're talking about, writing. Where's the bomb? So it starts off with a close-up of a bomb. The bomb is then placed in the trunk
I've
of
seen this.
of a car.
I've seen the
That
shots.
probably
One
showed
shot,
you.
right?
Yeah. It's a oneer, right? It's placed in the trunk of the car boot's closed, the car drives away. The camera then leaves the car, oneer, and goes up round the city, seeing everything else, planting, setting the scene. Where are we? I don't know what city it is, but we see everything else, and we see everyone shopping and doing their thing. But the whole time you're thinking, where's the bomb? Where's the bomb? Where's the bomb? Where's the bomb? And then even though we don't see it, we've lost track of where it's gone, it's in our head. There's a bomb there, and then the oneer's like 2-3 minutes, and then boom. Now that whole kind of oneer, the whole idea of showing the audience a piece of information and then misdirecting them over here, but they won't forget that.
Right.
That was so far before its time.
Pavlov's gun.
What's that?
Pavlov's gun.
Yes.
Or is it
Chekhov.
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 Yeah.
Sorry, wrong Star Trek. Chekhov's gun. Right.
And it's insane. It's insane how these tools are constantly forever being adapted and used to kind of empower that one main thing, which is always story. It's you get passionate just thinking about that.
Yeah. And as someone who's dabbled in many forms of storytelling, from trying to make video games with stories sometimes, and films with stories sometimes, I'm jumping over in time. I'm going to do it.
Go for it.
I'm jumping forward in time, quite a lot far in time.
I want to go back to the 60s though.
This is
like that anime about the girl who jumped through time.
I don't know which one we're.
It's called The Girl Who Jumped Through.
Oh wow! Okay, well there we go. Yes, direct
Sorry,
reference.
couldn't resist.
It's a funny thing. There's a lot of people talking about virtual reality and how we're going to tell stories in virtual reality. The hardest, and it's where it helps define what film is, because film is a medium where the director has complete control over what the audience will experience and when. The difference between video games and any virtual reality experiences is that the audience is given a lot more control, because the audience can look wherever they want. So you can be doing something interesting over here, but if the audience misses it, or the player is missing it and looking over there or doing something, it becomes very hard. That's why cutscenes are a thing in a lot of video games, because stop them playing, watch this, and then it morphs into filmmaking at that point. A God of War would be an example. You're playing the game, but whenever there are story elements, it's a film. It has to cut to...
Oh, it's one of the most cinematic games
I've
ever played.
It's great.
Yeah.
But it becomes really interesting, because then there are games that are kind of getting their postmodern elements of starting to use, and metamodern, starting to use the mechanics to help tell the story. That's when it starts getting really interesting. It's like, okay, stop trying to be film. What can we do to use the mechanics of our medium to help tell the
I think
story?
that's when it will become really transformative, as the more people...
Well, there are some that do it really well. Stanley Parable is a fun example. It's a fun, interesting game. It's basically all you do is walk around, and the narrative plays through with player choice, and like you're given doors, but all it has is a narrator as you go all the way through, and the narrator is really well written. It just keeps commenting on everything that you're doing.
It's literally like 4-dimensional writing, that isn't it?
Oh yeah, no, it's really hard to write for games.
It's hard to write for one perspective. Never mind.
And then
several.
It's funny that even in earlier video games, they were actually kind of getting it a little bit more, the potential of video games, because a lot of them were inspired by D&D, the very early video games, directly inspired by D&D. And D&D is all about, well, let's take the story wherever our players go.
Well,
What modernistic thing inspired D&D though? What resurged Dungeons and Dragons? Well, played a part in researching.
not inspired originally, but researched. Okay.
Researched it. There was one.
Baldur's Gate 3, are you going to talk about?
No.
Stranger Things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stranger Things had a big part. Anyway, sorry, that was just a little side.
No worries. D&D itself was. Should we stop for that?
It's actually okay now because I've got AI to clean everything up.
Oh, nice.
We're talking about our recording room being right next door to a toilet, and sometimes we hear the hand dryer go off. But
Just the hand dryer.
you may not hear this on the recording because the AI has cleaned it up very well.
What is that an AI plugin you're using on like Adobe?
Adobe Podcast.
Has it got an AI built-in AI for cleanup?
It's a separate thing, standalone. You just upload your audio and it cleans it up.
Wild.
I'm going to even keep this
They
in.
do make you sign a contract for your first 3 children. You might not like.
That's another industry dead.
Yeah, cleaning up audio.
Just requiring different levels of expertise, I would say.
That's it.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
It's not perfect. It gets a bit warm.
No, I know. You got to keep it.
It gets a bit warm.
Remember what happened when they had a bunch of kids cleaning up the caves at Io? No, I forget where. One of the Greek Neanderthal sites. They sent French school kids in to clean up pollution in the caves, and a bunch of them washed off a couple of cave paintings, not realizing what they were doing. So giving powerful tools to people who don't understand the domain is a very dangerous thing.
It's like an episode of Mr. Bean.
It truly is, and yet it's sadly part of human history that will never be recovered.
Sorry, I'm what?
No, it's
60,000-year-old graffiti. Let's get rid of it.
yeah, exactly, because they didn't know better.
Yeah.
Not their fault.
Yeah, that's not their fault at all. It's 100%.
We've gone around in a spin because we got distracted by a hand dryer on the wall.
So what I wanted to say there was D&D was inspired by Lord of the Rings,
Yes.
right? And it was inspired by Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings inspired a number of things, different types of games in the 60s and 70s. Some interesting novels, a whole genre of resurgence of fantasy, from classic fantasy to modern fantasy. The idea of different forms of reality intersecting in fantasy, which Elsbreg de Camp and others had done really well with modern fantasy, cross-dimensional fantasy, that kind of thing. D&D sort of encouraged all of that. But if we look at video games, I think video games came less from that originally and more from the early computer games. And the early computer games, some of them were video-based, like Asteroids, or what eventually became Asteroids, but a lot of it was command line games.
Yep.
And the original command line games were entirely two-dimensional. If you didn't follow this line, then you could choose that line, and that was it.
Yeah.
And that line ends 3 lines from now. So you've just died. So go back, start the game again, and choose this line. Thank you very much. Until Douglas Adams wrote the game for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Have either of you ever had a chance to play that?
Was that like SNES? Was it SNES that came out, that game?
No, it's before then.
Was it before SNES? Was it? I'm sure there was. Maybe there was a variation of it then.
There was a few. There was one with live action in it as well.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, no, the original Hitchhiker's Guide game was just a command line game. It was nothing else. And the thing that he did was, being Douglas Adams, brilliant storyteller, hilarious writer, he created a very multidimensional world where you did not have to follow the game plan. You could go and get into a conversation with an elevator, and it would lament to you how tough it is to be an elevator for hours worth of interaction.
Oh, I love Douglas Adams.
Was he not referenced in Ready Player One, like quite heavily as well? That movie.
He's referenced a lot.
I don't know.
Pardon me,
I don't
sorry.
know. I love Ready Player One, the novel. I quite liked the movie Ready Player
I
One.
really like that movie.
Yeah,
You weren't keen on it. I know, it was great.
You didn't read the novel, did you?
No.
I read the novels.
In the movie, it's Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Right? In the novel,
It's everything.
all human culture. So the characters are not all coming from one company.
Sorry, I just cut you off and tangent.
No worries. But
Yeah.
I strongly recommend the novel to anyone. The sequel is also good.
I think Jackie's loaded up the game for us to quickly have a look at what it looks like.
I think so.
Is that what it looked like?
Is that the thing?
It does look like it, yes, so it's hard to say.
I want to play that now, but I can talk to an elevator for a few hours.
Yeah, I know.
That was
It's pretty astounding.
Yeah,
If you love Douglas Adams, you'll like that. He also worked on another game with one of the Pythons, Terry Jones.
Terry Gilliam.
No, Terry Jones,
Terry
the
Jones,
other
sorry.
Terry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Terry Gilliam, the actor, comedian,
Yeah.
animator, and then Terry Jones, the author, actor, producer, and director.
Oh, really?
I guess they're both actors, producers, and directors. But
Yeah.
Terry Jones did a documentary, I think, for the BBC on the Middle Ages,
Okay.
which is worth seeing, even if you don't give a damn about the Middle Ages, just because Terry Jones is brilliant, or was brilliant.
It's kind of the themes of like kind of audience interaction, isn't it? Like when you're looking at the kind of games, what an audience can interact with like that games. When you're looking at like Ready Player One, about interaction with worlds, interaction with entertainment experiences, even VR. It's about kind of interactions with world around you and player choice. And I think that's a kind of really important thing that we've seen evolve through the kind of history of storytelling in cinema, is how the content is delivered to the audience, not just the tools used in terms of the visual stories, but distribution models as well, like how a person can engage with the work, where they can see it, where they can watch it, where they can interact with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's where streaming has changed things a lot as well. Every director now feels indulged to make 3-hour movies because...
Well, wait, don't get there yet. I'm building up to that. I'm building up to that as a massive Scorsese fanboy. It's just...
Well, unfortunately, great filmmakers aren't the only ones doing it.
I know, but going back to kind of like the kind of distribution models and how things are released to the audience, like kind of moving on from we talked about Touch of Evil, moving into the 60s. One of my favorite kind of stories is Hitchcock's Psycho. And sorry, Hitchcock's Psycho.
Slowly going out of shot.
So before Hitchcock's Psycho, there was no such thing as showing times. So like, if you want to see a movie, you would go to the movie, you pay your 25, 50 cents, and then you would go in, and the movie is just, it's just on loop. So people, it was just the norm, walking into a theatre halfway through a movie, sitting, watching the second half, and then watching the first half to where you walked in and then leaving.
Yeah.
Or you can watch it again.
Have you ever heard the expression, "This is where I came in"?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that where it comes from?
That's where it comes from.
All right. So Hitchcock, this is a really fun marketing story as well. Hitchcock's Psycho was the first film to use showtimes. It was the first thing to use showtimes. And the reason why they did it is because the marketing was heavily linked to Janet Leigh. Janet Leigh was a brilliant kind of actress that has been loads of things. She was an A-lister, superstar. And she was said to be the main character. But she dies 20 minutes in the movie. There's no such thing as
Spoiler.
There's no such thing as a spoiler. That movie, it's 60 years old now.
Sorry,
but
a moment ago you were encouraging people to see the film.
oh, you still need to watch the film. But she was marketed as the star of the movie. She dies 20 minutes into the movie. Yeah. So Hitchcock realized that, hang on a second, this is a big thing where I need the audience to see from the beginning right through. So he demanded there'd be screening times. And if you weren't there 5 minutes before you were locked, you had to go to the next screening. And that is still with us today. That little kind of change in how audience indulge in the kind of crafts you give them. Because if you walked into that movie half an hour after it started, you'd be sitting there waiting to see Janet Leigh. Where's Janet Leigh? She's over all the posters. Oh, she died 10 minutes ago.
And it changed not only what theaters can get away with, which was saying, oh no, you pay for one show, you get one show. Right, so it gave them the power to do that.
That's right.
It also changed what storytellers could do with their films, where you didn't have to be non-sequentially entertaining.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of saying every shot is going to be entertaining, whether you see the first half of the movie, the second half, or in reverse order or whatever, all of a sudden you could say, this is a story that starts here, and it's going to build up. So be there for the build up.
Yeah.
And that changed everything about cinema.
There's TV's had a similar cycle as well with everything used to be serialized, meaning if you take the original style, use Star Trek as the example. Star Trek's a good example. You watched the original series or TNG, Next Generation. You can drop in any single episode. It has a start, a middle, and an end.
Self-contained.
And by the next generation, they were really good at it. They tell really, really good stories in 40 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever they are. Then, as audiences of more on-demand technologies have come in, people have got more comfortable telling longer arcs along TV series, to the point where if you watch any new Star Trek, I'm not a fan. I know people like it, but they have these long arcs, and it kind of feels like they're trying to go for the Marvel audience, and they're going for the big.
The movies were good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Some of them.
The new movies I'm talking about.
Yeah, I hate them.
Yeah, and there's
You what?
I hate the new Star Trek movies.
Really?
I don't like them that much.
I really enjoyed them.
No, there's a.
Sequel is okay.
No, I'm sorry.
I say that having never watched any of the other Star Treks.
Well, I've been a fan of Star Trek since the original series wasn't called original because it was the only one.
It was just Star
Do
Trek.
you know that there's astronauts in space?
So, yeah, often when I'm criticizing, as I did in a publication a couple of years back, the new versions of Star Trek, the line I like to use is, does this lens flare make my plot look thin?
There is lots of length. JJ is
Lots of lens flare, and there's very thin plots. If you look at the original concept of Star Trek, in order to market it, he had to do episodic television because that's what people wanted.
Right.
People say Star Trek is just a wagon train in space, and they're misunderstanding a famous line from a pitch, which was, it will be the television series Wagon Train, except in space. Wagon Train was the most popular series on television. One of the reasons producers loved it was because you had a core cast who were directing this wagon train, which was huge and had hundreds of people in it, and you only knew a few. So every episode, they would land in a different town or patch of desert or native reserve, and they would be interacting with new characters, so you could bring in the guest star, give them a great dramatic role for one episode. And if your regulars gave you any guff, they're in a different part of the wagon train this week.
That's when space toys killed cowboy toys.
Thank you, Star Trek. Well, actually, thank you, Lost in Space, which was a good few.
You probably know more about this than me. I heard that. Like, I don't indulge in conspiracy theories, but some of them are fun.
Sure. Some diseases are fun too. Absolutely.
No, there was one about Star Trek. And there's a group of people that genuinely believe, who created Star Trek again?
Gene Roddenberry.
Who?
Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah, so have you heard that rumor that apparently, like, people say that he was contacted by outer worldly things and gave them inspiration to start kind of tuning humans into understanding, so when it does happen, we're kind of used to it. It's what a lot of people genuinely believe that.
Yeah, they're welcome to believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying I believe.
No, if it gives them comfort at night when the sky is dark and the world is cold, then more power to them. Gene Roddenberry, he was a cop, and he was inspired to write Star Trek in part because he had a vision of a post-war world where people wouldn't care so much about personal things and they could see themselves as part of a larger picture.
All right.
But
Yeah.
in part because of a pamphlet that was written by Vannevar Bush, who was the lead scientist of the United States, appointed by a president who died before he could read Vannevar Bush's report. So he was appointed by Roosevelt. Roosevelt died before Bush wrote his first prospectus about the future focus of science, post-war focus of science in the United States. He gave it over to Truman instead. Vannevar Bush is the guy who wrote the famous magazine article, As We May Think, where he predicted things like dry processing.
Heard of that, yeah.
Miniature cameras, people taking selfies, people doing their own videos, the desktop as the basis of computer technology, information being freely available and the connections you make with it being more important than the information you generate. So he predicted all those things. He wrote a pamphlet about the future of science and post-war where he said, in the same way that he had coordinated thousands of scientists and a huge budget, I think $5 billion at the time, for all science in the United States during the war, leading to the Manhattan Project and all that stuff. He said, we can do that post-war and tackle other things. And his idea was tackle the sea, tackle space. He wrote a beautiful little pamphlet about space in which he used a number of phrases that reappear in the opening sequence of every Star Trek episode.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Great lore there.
again, this is another thing that I've written about, and I haven't seen anybody else write about it. But hopefully, those of you paying attention to the podcast will now claim it as your own.
Yeah, confidently say it. Well,
Yeah. No, it's fascinating.
So this is where the inspiration for going to space came from. It came from Vannevar Bush and this idea that we could do something better with humanity by taking all of the money that we've been using for war and all of
All
the
the BS.
concentrated effort.
Yeah.
Truman said no. He decided that the money and effort and government interest could best be given to the military and to the development of industry. And when Truman retired, he gave a speech in which the first person to use the phrase, the military-industrial complex, and he warned that it would take over the world because of decisions he had made.
yep.
I like to think that that's the splitting point between our world and the world of Star Trek, was that in the world of Star Trek, maybe a different president, maybe Truman, listened to Vannevar Bush and said, okay, we're developing space.
Yeah. The
It's quite sad, that. Sad story.
it's also
Like humanity.
but Gene Roddenberry,
It's accurate.
Gene Elise was obviously quite optimistic about the future, and it's all there in the original Star Trek original
absolutely
series, and the TNG especially. So one of the reasons why I don't like new Star Trek, it's a very postmodernist take on everything. Like, we're all bad, we have no chance, we are the worst things in the universe.
What gets me, if you'll pardon my jumping in,
Yeah.
but it's Star Trek and I have to. In the original series and in The Next Generation, the crew were experts who came from a society where you could be an expert. And if you had any potential for expertise, all of society supported you in being the best at this that any human has ever been. So they had these absolute experts who were solving incredibly complex problems in nice, simple narrative.
Yes.
The newer versions of Star Trek, especially the movies, the latter movies,
Oh, they're surface that.
well, they took the exact opposite approach on every one of those dimensions. The characters have not finished their training. Some of them haven't even started their training yet. So they're not
very-
experts. They're emotional children.
One of them becomes a captain.
Yeah, that day. And
Yeah.
so
yeah.
they have no expertise.
I love your passive aggression towards the new star.
They're solving incredibly blasé problems, but in a complicated story.
Yeah.
So they try to make the storytelling as complicated as possible. They give childish solutions to childish problems, being performed by people who argue with each other and never coalesce as a team.
Yep.
Star Trek was all about what they called the Vulcan ideology of infinite diversity through infinite combinations. The more different you are, the better you can work together. Star Trek, the motion picture, or no, Star Trek, what was it called?
I think it's just
Star Trek, the movie?
Star Trek, then Star Trek Into Darkness, and it was Star Trek
Oh, man.
something.
Star Trek, our ship is being destroyed. We need to get over to that ship. Let's fire ourselves out of missile tubes through an asteroid field where we will, by sheer force of heroism,
yeah.
avoid all of the things that could kill us and find holes in that ship that somehow lead to contained atmosphere.
Plot armor.
Yeah.
Lazy writing. It's
The worst lazy writing.
I did that in Star Wars with with Princess Leia as
a
well.
lot of it happened with
hurt.
Doctor Who as well.
Oh, I don't.
Doctor Who, his sonic screwdriver just became the laziest piece of writing ever. Like, how do
I've
we get
never
it
been a
from here?
big cube. I've never been a big.
But you know it.
So,
Yeah.
so it's interesting though, because I can't really contribute much to Star Trek. Because
No worries. I'm sorry. We've talked more than
No,
enough
but I
about
would love
Star
you to actually guide me in where's best to start with Star Trek, because I've always wanted to actually watch it.
a two-part episode called The Cage, which was the first episode of it was the original pilot of Star Trek.
And I'm lucky enough that I've got some. So like, my one of my mentors when I was over in the States, I haven't spoken to him in a long time, but he was Adam Nimoy. It was Leonard Nimoy's son.
Oh, really, Adam? No kidding.
Yeah, and he was our directing instructor, and he used to tell us all these kind of just like the most genius of kind of stories about being on that set, and how they kind of overcame various things with his dad, obviously Leonard, rest in peace, and all that kind of things. And I was so I didn't appreciate it as much as someone like you would.
No, I would have been fanboying all over.
Yeah, but he was like the nicest guy, and he was so like I actively still input his teachings into everything we do, because he was very kind of, you know, black and white, this and this, but his insight was just incredible, right about it. And he used to tell us kind of stories about being on set and stuff, and it was just amazing.
Wow.
And we had, but what you brought up Doctor Who there a second. Now, I've never been a big Doctor Who guy either. I just haven't. And I know a lot of people that are and talk about new series, but it's kind of the full circle that we're talking about. Now, what you were talking about there with Star Trek was, I'm going to try and go around in a big circle here and link this back to the Golden Age.
We like circles.
We do like circles.
I'm going to link this back to the Golden Age, and I'm going to carry forward what we were talking about.
Thank you for telling us your red thread. I appreciate that.
That's for me. About Star Trek, about the kind of stories in the episodes, where it's complex stories and people working together as teams and all that kind of stuff. But every episode had a form of commentary. It had something to say. It had themes. It had lessons.
Yes, very important.
That's what we believe that's what cinema is for. That's what the storytelling is. The story isn't about once upon a time. It's about kind of actively engaging with a problem or something that you want to say that kind of reflects real world, because that's what builds empathy and has audience attached. And that's what we kind of talk about, you know, like when we're talking about elevate genre, or what's a meta-modernist.
So the difference being, and this is a high-level explanation I've heard other people say, but one way to look at it is postmodernistic is really good at critiquing and pointing out flaws, but that's all it does. Right? It's really easy to critique and point things out and say that's rubbish.
It's about having the follow-up.
What's harder, is to come along and have a positive outlook for a solution.
Yeah.
That's what metamodernism is coming around and actually having, pointing out all the flaws, using everything as tools to point out all the flaws and saying this is bad, that's bad, but then figuring out a way to come back around and have a positive outlook on how to improve things.
Jamie just encapsulated what it means to mark work from students as well. That's wrong, but I need to tell you how to make it better.
Yeah.
No, but so that's that problem about the lack of that, the lack of depth. We just came out of a huge lull in Hollywood. We're on our way back out of it, where we've had the last 10 years. It's not been great.
There's any time there's isolating.
There is, but it comes in cycles, and it kind of happened as well in the 70s in Hollywood. And this problem they had this kind of lull because there was what was the name of that? The company that pretty much censored everything that you could put in. Like you couldn't have a flushing toilet in a movie. What was the name of it? No, it was like the overseer of films of what people could and couldn't say or do in movies.
Oh, the guidance board.
Yeah, it was the firm. I can't remember the name of it, but it put so much limitation on creativity. Right. Like, and there's some ridiculous things like you couldn't have a flushing toilets, you could cuss, you could swear, you couldn't have violence, you could show blood, and because of that, there was this constant conveyor belt of just the same, constantly, and people got bored of it, so the numbers dropped. But then what happened was in the 70s, start of the Golden Age. Mid-70s, the industry thought, you know what, we need to change for our younger audience. This is what relates to what we're seeing now. And we saw, and they says, okay, what we need to do is we need to change, we need to look at our younger audience because we're losing them. So what they did was they tore up the guidance of what it was, and then they empowered young auteurs, young filmmakers to come up and make things.
Yeah,
that's Spielberg.
What were some of these names?
Jaws, George Lucas, Star Wars, and his wife, of course. There was Warren Beatty. Did Warren Beatty direct Bonnie and Clyde? No, he directed the original Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh boy,
Bonnie and Clyde. There was Dennis Hopper, Easy Rider. There was kind of loads of this. Michael Cimino, Deer Hunter. You know. That kind of rates. And what happened was they kind of empowered these kind of smaller budget things to go and do whatever they wanted. And look what happened. It was a golden age of cinema. the golden age of Hollywood, and that kind of happened. But one of my favorite things that happened, it's linkable to what you were talking about earlier, was one of those filmmakers, Michael Cimino, that did Deer Hunter, which was a masterpiece, right?
Absolutely.
They said to him, right, we want you to do another one, and this is what closed that circle again. We want you to do another one, and I want to give you more money to do it. And he took a project called Heaven's Gate. You heard of it? Heaven's Gate was a project, and it is known to be the biggest bomb in cinematic history because they too much power. They went well over budget, tens of millions at that time over budget. And what happened was that closed the circle where the Hollywood studios had to step back in and say, no, we can't do this anymore. We can't do this anymore. We need input to make sure, our investments are being protected. But now it's gone back again because what you were saying about streamers.
Yeah.
What's happening there?
Now, because Netflix started making a heck of a lot of money, everyone else started coming in, making their own services and whatever. But then, because the best things that work on those platforms is long episodic series, so hour-long episodes, 10-part a series, kind of standard-ish, what they're going for. Because that model's popular and like Stranger Things just becomes this massive industry machine. Everyone else is going, let's do that. So everyone now is kind of gone into this emboldened, because that model was making money, studios are going, okay, come to us. What's your creative? Okay, I've got a feature here. I want to do this, and
Scorsese or Nolan.
yeah, I've got this feature I want to do. And then they say, okay, that's good, but can you make that a series? And then all of a sudden you end up with a lot of these series that are just stretched out features that are really...
Or you get features that are 3.5 hours long because the studio wants the streamer wants that director. So they say, you have full creative control. And then you give even if it's us,
yeah,
you don't give us full creative control.
I'll remember that.
No, you can't because you get polluted by your work and it's hard to kind of follow. And there's only a few that do it.
it's what editors are for. Editors are a profession that are massively underrated in the
we had the Oscars last week, and like I'm a huge Scorsese fanboy. Like you were talking about your sci-fi Spielberg, me too, but Scorsese for me is the king. Hitchcock as well, and Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm still trying to watch it. I'm still trying to finish it. It is
just too powerful or too long.
Too long. No, the content isn't even like that heavy around, and it's looks great and does all the things, but the pacing is just like I'm just like, oh my god, like why is this taking so long to go anywhere? And if Oppenheimer was the same, and I feel horrible and dirty for saying it because everyone was like, oh my god, Oppenheimer, and it was beautiful and well acted performance, but there's no reason for that to be 3.5 hours long.
Okay, now don't take this personally,
Please.
but you also like the new Star Trek.
I like
There's extremes. There is.
We all have those kind of guilty pleasure.
Absolutely.
Things that
There's a lot of films that I wouldn't recommend to anyone that I absolutely enjoy.
Yeah.
And games and comics and novels too.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a time for watching art or interacting with art. And there's a time for
mindset.
interacting with something.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes, a lot of the time, I'll go home in the evening and I just want to watch a YouTube video. I want to watch someone on YouTube.
You want some heavy.
Talk about something. There are other times I want to go on Mubi and watch something really good. It's a really good piece of cinema and learn from it and be moved. But then, sometimes you just want.
You need something just 2D sometimes to switch off. And I get that.
Yeah.
My switch off movies I have, we all have, let's all share a switch off movie that you would never see. Let's do that. That's good fun. So like, I do like this. I did like the Star Treks when they came out because you know what? I call them easy watches. You don't have to overthink it.
Yeah.
In fact, you can't.
Well, you can't really overthink it.
No,
You can't.
because the minute you do, it's just nonsense.
Falls apart.
Yeah.
I also really love the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah.
Love the Harry Potter movies. I can watch them, rewatch them constantly because of the world and the story, the characters, and all that kind of stuff.
I'm with you. Same.
Yeah, and they're easy watches, you know.
There's nothing wrong with them. There's some good pieces of cinema, like especially when you get to the third one.
Yeah, the Goblet of Fire when it starts going dark.
Yeah.
See, that's interesting now. I would say the Goblet of Fire is a directorial misfire.
Yeah?
I think so.
But not all the way through. Some of it is beautiful.
I'm thinking wait, which one?
Prisoner of Azkaban is when
that's-
the first see
is that-
Dario.
that's the third
That's the third one.
Yeah, that's one.
That's when it starts going dark. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Goblet of Fire is the first proper death.
The director of Prisoner of Azkaban is, I forget his name. He's Guillermo del Toro's friend.
Who did Prisoner of Azkaban? It's on the tip of my tongue. It's annoying me.
Because it's
Alfonso Cuarón.
Alfonso Cuarón did the later ones, I think.
it's really it's fantastic. In terms of
Yeah, I agree.
directing. and
Absolutely
performance.
beautiful. The
Who did it?
the wraith-like creatures coming to the train for the first time.
yeah.
That's cinematically that's gorgeous.
There you go, guys.
In terms of the graphics, in terms of the story.
Alfonso Cuarón. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
Alfonso Cuarón. Yeah, Alfonso Cuarón. Yeah.
So, yes, I like that. What I didn't like is the way that the new Dumbledore is directed in Goblet of Fire.
Right.
You've got
Well, he was in the third one. He was in
he was.
Prisoner of Azkaban. Yeah.
I can hear my wife, who loves Harry Potter, screaming.
No, it's 100%. Guarantee you. It was Richard Harris for the first two, and then Michael Gambon stepped in from the third onwards.
Yeah. And he was, I think, directed incorrectly in the character. Maybe part of it was making his own statement on the character. But the character in the books and in the first two films is not flustered by anything at all.
Yeah, he's chill. Yeah.
He is so old and so powerful and so cool
Yeah.
that just nothing bothers him. When Harry's name is found to be in the Goblet of Fire,
You see panic.
It's a meme. It's also a meme of how.
is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't look at memes because it's a theft of a proper word.
Well, the meme is like it's one line in the book. It's just like one simple line is something I can't remember, but it's really simple, and then it cuts to how it is in this film, and he's like,
I could.
Rushing and
I
he's
could.
screaming and he's
Yeah.
angry,
yeah,
and it's just like total violation of the character. Takes you out of the story.
I think so. Let me ask you this: do you think that's a choice to up the stakes for the cinematic purposes of the story?
It might have been, but I don't know if it was the directors or the actors. A lot of actors,
The writers probably maybe as well.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I know that there's a common thing in stage actors who go to film. At least I've read about it in a couple of autobiographies, including recently Patrick Stewart's, that there's a common thing that they do where in the same way that on stage they would have many attempts to show the character, they keep it alive by taking slightly different takes on the character all the time. Sometimes when they're filming, they'll do each take with a different interpretation of the lines. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody thought, at some point Gambon thought, I'm going to do it once with Rage.
yeah.
And somebody thought, that's a better moment.
Rage and
That's a more
Fear.
exciting
Rage and Fear.
It
yeah.
could have
It's set up.
at that point. It could be in the
I
editor.
believe Spider Robinson's admonition that anger is always fear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, that could have been the editor deciding it was a better.
Yeah, it could well have been. It could have been a producer. It could have been any of the people who get to stand over the editor's shoulder and say, hey, you're an artist and you're doing really great work, but I think you should do this.
See, I couldn't imagine that scene any other way. If like, could you? It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work if he was calm about it. Do you think?
But I don't know. I think the most powerful people tend to be very calm.
Oh
Yeah, I think you could do that scene way better if you use the Sorcerer's Apprentice as a reference. You know, that is a wise, scary man coming in.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, even if you just imagine.
How have we arrived here? This is the most tangent conversation.
Welcome to SocTalk.
We're having a life.
Exactly.
We're talking about Jaws a minute ago, and we're talking about a beat in Goblet of Fire.
Yep,
So
yep.
if you think about Dumbledore greeting the first-year students for the first time,
Yes.
and the beneficent way that he presides over an entire castle full of magic
it's Richard
that
Hunt,
you've
yeah.
never seen before.
Phenomenal.
Imagine him doing that in that scene. Maybe a slight tinge of sadness, maybe a slight tinge of surprise, but not even that. He's only asking the question because everybody wants him to.
Yeah, because
He knows that it wasn't Harry.
Yeah, Harry was. That's interesting. Because Harris was in the first two unflappable, he would say. Like he was very soft. You know what? Let's work on that a second.
Let's do it.
Because
This is cool.
this is good. Because Okay, so let's have a look at the second one, Chamber Secrets. Okay, so once
See, I would say that's when it gets dark.
it does get dark there because once the chamber's opened and we have that scene with the dude's cat that's been petrified,
The dude's cat.
right? The dude's cat, Felch, this cat that's been petrified, it's hanging there and it's got blood. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Everyone arrives. It's Richard Harris, isn't it? That's his name. Is it Richard Harris?
Yes.
Yeah. Richard Harris arrives. Everyone's freaking out. McGonagall's about to lose her shit. Going,
Which does not happen.
yeah, I know.
There it
Everyone's panicking. Snape's there. The janitor guy's wanting to kill them because they've done his cat. I wonder, because if Harris arrives, he's very calm. He's, your cat is fine. He'll be whatever, healed. And then they kind of carry, he does approach it with a degree of calmness. I wonder what that scene would have been like with Gambon. That same scene, would he have been lighter, more grandeur? I mean, how would that have gone?
I don't know.
And
I
how-
don't, and
how
I
would it
don't
been-
know, like you were saying, I don't know if it would have been the actor who made a difference. It would have been the writers who made a difference.
Yeah.
It would have been Chris Columbus taking a
Yeah,
back
Chris
seat
Columbus.
more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't know which of those it was, but I loved the way that Dumbledore was portrayed in the first two films.
Yeah.
In the later films, there are parts of it where it's just beautiful, but there are parts, especially that one scene in the Goblet of Fire, where there's just an anger there that, yes, makes a dynamic scene,
Yes.
but doesn't serve the characters or the story. And that is exactly how I feel about the entirety of the modern Star Trek films.
Yep.
It absolutely makes an exciting moment, but that does not serve the characters or the story.
John's never going to let me off the hook with this one, is he?
Never. Never. That's it. That has changed our working relationship and our friendship forever.
No, I agreed. So this is also where, it's where you have to, me and Nicci as filmmakers are making sure we try and, it's a craft you got to work on, and you've got to try and figure out what kind of filmmaker do you want to be and what kind of stories do you want to tell. And that's something we've been trying to do, is to not get dragged in directions that people end up going down of, flashy fun.
Take
do
that
this,
effect
do that.
to realize that.
Yeah, we were really trying to focus on, okay, but what is the heart? What is the heart of it? If you strip this all the way back, I mean, I forget who wrote the book, but there's a book, it's in the 7 plots. And it's an argument that there are basically 7 stories. And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You've got Rite of Passage. You've got the kind of rags to riches. You've got riches to I've read that. Who is that again?
Please look for that, the 7 plots.
it's on the tip of
Was
my
it
tongue.
Goldman?
I've got it sitting on my shelf.
7 plots books.
We're checking this because we want to be right on this one.
Yeah.
The 7 basic plots. There it is. Who is it? It is Christopher Booker. Is that the right one?
Is that
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
is that the one you're talking about?
I don't know.
Original Bill,
That's not the one I was thinking.
No, me neither.
Well,
That's from 2004, and it's based on Jungian psychoanalysis.
yeah. And then there's also Joseph Campbell as well with The Hero's Journey.
The hero with 1,000 faces.
But anyway,
Robert McKee guy. I mean.
different people saying ultimately the same thing, is that there are foundational human stories, and ultimately, no surprise, we all kind of go through similar things throughout life. And fundamentally, the human experience is we like to pretend that we're massively different than our ancestors and predecessors, when really a lot of our experiences are the same. And when you strip back really good stories, that is what they're doing. They are we're going all the way back to campfires now. The reason you're telling campfire stories is to teach, quite often as well. It's to teach. You can just say, hey, be a good person in life. Don't there are lines like, don't judge a book by its cover, which, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But a story lets you synchronize with a character, and you go through all the motions. So it's almost like a simulation in a way. It's kind of like a simulation to go through a journey and potentially maybe learn something by the end of it where you're not in danger. You've learned.
I agree. In fact, I think the simulation part of it is really important.
Yeah.
As we've discussed before, I think there's not much difference between the way, in terms of our anatomical senses, in terms of the way we cognitively deal with the sensory information we collect. There's not much difference between experiencing a story firsthand and experiencing a story someone is telling you, as long as you're immersed in it.
Yep. Yep.
Right?
It's a recipe.
Yeah.
And that's
Just stick 'em, like, so just for light.
It's a
gets
recipe.
more and more intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you start blocking the light on John.
Have to put you on a track, like the camera in Wings. The thing I was trying to say is, the experience of being told a story, if it's engaging, allows you to feel that you have experienced those lessons.
Yes.
And it's the same thing with cinema. It's the same thing with video games. If the story is engaging cognitively, emotionally, inspirationally, then you feel like you've lived those things.
Yeah.
If you talk to people about a video game they've played, they don't say, and then the character did this, right? They say, I did this, and then I did that, right? So they're experiencing it viscerally. Yeah.
I think when it comes to that idea of following this recipe, as we all speak about the recipe, and the things that we want to do, right? We want to go to market. We want to kind of get a sense of what people like, but what we follow the tried and tested methods. And anybody that says don't follow that, do completely different, no one's going to watch it or see it, because the audience likes familiarity to an extent.
Sure.
And it's about kind of building the same kind of structures and stories and themes that we know people like. That's why I love horror, and we know what people like, with the same kind of character beats, the same kind of structures, the same kind of tones, but then you kind of take the mechanics and you change them. You make them more unique. That's what you elevate your project to be something different. It's a unique spin on something. So like, I always use this as an example, and I kind of run with it. I think it typifies what we're trying to do, what we're saying. Have you seen the movie Taken?
Yeah.
Have you seen what's that about? Give me a sentence. What's Taken about?
It's,
Liam Neeson goes on a rampage to get his daughter.
Yes.
I would say it's about the powerlessness that older men feel when their families don't need them anymore.
That's interesting perspective. That's really deep. I don't think the writers of Taken even went that deep with that, to be honest, John.
Oh, that's my impression.
No, of course. Have you seen the movie Prisoners? Denis Villeneuve.
No,
Okay, you need to watch
I
that.
loved it. Even.
Yeah. It's one of his early stuff. What's Prisoners about?
It's kind of the same plot,
It's the
right?
same plot.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's about fathers that lose their daughters or try to win them back. It's two of the same plots. Are they the same movie, Taken and Prisoners? No, they're so different. So like, the mechanics are the same. It's desperation, it's need, it's helpless, powerless fathers looking for their daughters in need, and the desperation they go through, them having to kind of unleash the monster to do whatever it takes to do it. But the way in which these two characters do their things is so different. One is kind of action, quick pace, where we don't really even know the name of the bad guy, and one is a father in desperation going dark, doing everything they can, sacrificing everything to get the answers. Now that's two of the same plots, but the way in which the mechanics that Villeneuve used for Prisoners to kind of bring out that desperation is incredibly different. And one of my favorite things about it is when people talk about cinematography, okay? It was Roger Deakins that did Prisoners. Who's a genius, as we know. Now, when you talk about like beautiful cinematography, everyone's going to speak about Dune or Blade Runner or The Assassination of Jesse James, which is unbelievable to watch and look at. For me, one of my favorite cinematography films is Prisoners, because it is perfect cinematography for that movie, because it's ugly. It's ugly, and it mirrors that of the character's journey. And it was a really interesting interview with Deakins where he was talking about inspiration. Now, we were talking about inspiration being inspired. Now, we're kind of inspired by, a lot of A24 stuff, Nope, Jordan Peele stuff, elevated genre of familiar stories, but just done in really unique ways. Whenever you look at any cinematographer that's putting together a lookbook for a way to do a project, any cinematographer, in that lookbook, if they had like a 20-page lookbook full of visual references and comparables from other movies, I'd give you, you know, good money that there's going to be at least one Roger Deakins shot in that book, because he has that impact on aspiring cinematographers. He's everyone's hero, Deakins, in terms of what he can do, being so. He's so moldable and adaptable to what he does to fit the story. And he did an interview when he was talking about his inspiration, and he was talking about his inspiration of photography, and he was showing these photos of artists' photographies and other movies in his work that he was inspired with. And he held them side by side with some of his frames. So some of his frames that people were inspired with, thinking, that's Roger Deakins, man, no one could do that, that's Roger Deakins. He's like, no, look. And he showed it. And there's a shot in Prisoners where it's like, it's like a bike in a yard. It's a beautifully shot kind of bike in a yard. It's like a kind of, it's rainy and it's a bit rusty and so on. And there's people walking. He took the same picture that was just a snap Polaroid from an artist, the book next to it. It's the same shot. It's the same shot. Yeah. And it's just like, that's Deakins. People use Deakins in that way, but there's no level of inspiration for anyone. No. And I think I think it's really beautiful that we're good at putting people on pedestals and being inspired, of course, but like, I mean, I'm really inspired by Steve McQueen, filmmaker Steve McQueen. And
one of my favorite ones is the whole character of Indiana Jones.
Okay.
The whole character of Indiana Jones. There was one serial cover that is an adventurer jumping off a horse onto a truck, and it's Indiana Jones. It's literally Indiana Jones. They even recreate that shot in Raiders. George Lucas saw that and was like, I'm going to make a whole character based on that. And it's just one image.
Really?
Yeah. So see if you can see it. See Indiana Jones original serial cover. Maybe we'll find it. Maybe we won't. Maybe this
daughter's named after Indiana Jones. I don't tell my wife that.
Put in horse as well, just because it might. We might get it.
Daughter's called Indy. The youngest.
Yeah, there it is. I think that first one.
We're named the dog,
Is
Indy.
it? No.
We're named the dog, Indy.
Okay, this is not going to find it. Oh, there's the actual shot in the film. Him jumping off the.
I've got a fun,
jumping off the horse.
I've got a fun trivia.
I can't find the
fun trivia truth about Indiana Jones.
Oh, I could talk all day about Indiana Jones.
Well, you know the story.
You can see me wearing, like, I wear these types of shirts literally because of Indiana Jones.
I've got a pair of glasses because of Indiana Jones. The circle frame was similar.
Yes.
Not these ones. The gold ones.
All right.
That's a difference in our generations, gentlemen.
Yeah.
I carried a whip because of Indiana Jones.
Yeah. I've got a bullwhip as well.
We got away with that now, so. If you just casually walked around with a whip?
No, every opportunity. Any kind of costume party.
Okay.
Always, yeah.
I was Indiana Jones. I had a whip that a friend had given me.
Same.
I taught myself how to use it. First time I tried to use it, I only hit myself in the hand.
We're way more. Every time we talk, we find out we're much more similar. And same, likewise. There's pictures of me, and every time, any chance I get to do dress up, I'm either Indiana Jones or a cowboy.
Or Firefly.
No, that's not it.
I have to tell you,
don't worry about it.
One of the great experiences of my horribly violent youth was walking to a costume party and encountering a group of guys dressed as the KKK while I was dressed as Indiana Jones. And I told them to take off their costumes. I added a few words that I won't say on the podcast. And we ended up fighting. So I got to fight a bunch of guys in hoods with a whip in my hand. It was brilliant.
That's decent. That's
I could hear the
that's short film stuff. That you know, that's narrative. One of the funniest things. It's not really funny actually because it was violence. But one of the totally true story. Me and my friend were sat outside, next to this beer garden, Triple Kirk's.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We were sitting in Triple Kirk's beer garden, and this is 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And we were sitting outside, no, it would have been 20 years ago, it would have been about 15 years ago. We were sitting outside having a pint and a cigarette. And I heard like an almighty shout, and it was around about Halloween. And there was two or three Neds, kind of, non-educated delinquents would call it.
Oh, Neds. Nice.
Yeah.
Not Flanders.
What?
Not Flanders.
No, not Ned Flanders. That would have been a very different story, but a fun one though. And they all kind of ran out just outside the arts centre, and they were all kind of thinking. And then out of nowhere, the Avengers, the actual Avengers, people, there was Hulk, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Captain America, all descended into the scene, and there was a massive fight between like a group of Neds and the Avengers. And I was just sitting there with my pipe like that, like, what is happening here?
Wow.
And then the Avengers won, the Neds ran away
That reminds me, there's
celebrating. It's like surreal, isn't it?
That's when you wish you had your camera just hanging
yeah.
around
There's
your
an
neck,
episode of
filming.
there's an episode of Only Fools and Horses.
Oh, Batman and Robin.
They're dressed as Batman and Robin.
It's iconic. That is iconic. Absolutely iconic. Yeah, yeah. And they actually have a moment where they run.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right. Look, I think we've actually come. Well, how do we bring this back all around? Wrap around this in a circle. So, dressing up. We like to dress up. Why do we like to dress up as these heroes? Because story is important, and
We were inspired.
we step into the characters whose story finishes in a way that ours doesn't. Right? We are faced with the crowd of Neds, and the best thing to do is to sit and hold your beer. But if the Avengers were there, right, we're walking to a costume party and a bunch of guys insist on being the KKK, it's best to tip your hat lower over your eyes and pretend you didn't notice them, right? But if you could be Indiana Jones in that hat, right, you get to beat the crap out of them and then ride off on your horse to look for Miriam, wherever the hell she is.
That's it. Yeah, for sure.
I'd say that's what, if you'll forgive me stepping out, you're right.
no.
We're inspired. We're inspired by these
Inspired,
characters.
and that's what stories can do. And that's where, if we're going to wrap it back, not to violence or anything, but with at least what me and Nick are trying to do is at least use the medium in itself to try and teach people. But the things to teach are never changed. The old-fashioned ways of being a good person, they're pretty much the same throughout human history. Sure, there's different cultures and ideas and ideologies, but ultimately,
Morals remain.
be good, be a good person, be good to your family, respect other people. There's foundational things that sometimes people just, it's good to end on it. So everybody, if you've listened to us.
Let me take that, because exactly what you're saying. One of the earliest stories we know about from human history is the story of Gilgamesh,
Yes.
a great hero. And Gilgamesh goes off, and in his hero's journey, he fights Enkidu, the lead warrior of their enemy tribe. And the two of them fight, and they have to kill each other. But they have such respect for each other as they're fighting, they become best friends and move forward on their journey together.
Yes.
And I think that's something that's often missing from modern stories, is the fact that our original stories have us making friends with our enemies.
Yes.
Our mutual respect. And I think that's a very good point, because I think one of the things that we always miss, and the really good films that we see that we always really like, is even the most nasty antagonist, even the most nasty, iconic antagonists often have a very good point in why they do what they do. You can actually understand why they do what they do, and they go about things in a complete wrong way.
Sure. But if they
That's
didn't
what
have-
they're supposed to be. That's why it's an antagonist.
But
yes.
exactly, but they've got the rationales, and that's what makes a good character.
If they didn't, you wouldn't care.
Yeah, and that's why. But there's loads of ones where you don't really see the rationale, and they're just bad for the
Not in Star Trek movies.
Yeah, the road to hell is paved with gold, and two characters that have the same objectives, but one is misinformed and will go down the wrong pathway. And that's again what stories
Batman and the
are
Joker.
for, is showing you with experience that yes, we all have these ideas of where to go and how to be good, but take it from some other people who've learned the hard way. Take it from these stories that is not the right direction.
Well, Batman and the Joker, specifically Nolan's Batman and the Joker, they're the same objectives. You know, they just had different ways of doing it. They both wanted to save and cleanse Gotham to an extent. Why? You know,
cleanse.
No, they did, but they just went to different ways. Batman wanted to constantly kind of keep Gotham instead, and Joker believed in order to kind of cure things, you need to burn it to the ground and let it regrow. But the intention is the same, because I mean, he has set something on fire, he kills him. He hates the same things that Batman does as well.
But
if you look at them side by side.
But Batman
Specifically
is
that.
deliberately written as a psycho, right? If you'll pardon my using the careful psychiatric term. He's a psychotic, right?
Of course
he's
he is.
dissociated from reality at the age of 8 by trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he has an 8-year-old's idea of how you deal with trauma. He's going to punch all the bad guys.
It's the darkest.
He's not going to cure them.
Yeah.
He's going to punch them.
Yeah.
Right? Doc Savage, to go back to film noir type ideas, Doc Savage from the pulp magazines from the 1920s, not the horrible 70s film. Doc Savage was the original superhero, named Clark with the Fortress of Solitude, scientific genius trained to be the greatest fighter, greatest thinker, greatest detective. Very much where Batman and Superman both came from. He had a hospital for criminals, and every criminal that he successfully captured was sent to the hospital to have a surgery performed on their brain and a therapy conducted on them that would cure them of their criminal tendencies.
Yeah.
Which is horrible and barbaric by today's standards. But if you don't know anything about how the brain works or about how evil really builds up in someone's life, it was a lovely idea because he could cure the bad guys, not just punch them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? Whereas the Shadow at the same time,
Funnily
the
enough,
Spider would just kill them.
funnily enough, recently they went back to that a little bit when Spider-Man No Way Home. He had all his bad guys in one place, and he tried to help them.
That was so well done. See, I love.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah, I've listened to once that scene.
I
Yeah.
love that idea, and he and a couple of the bad guys specifically worked together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It was
Exactly.
Dr. Octopus.
Yeah. The Green Goblin. Yeah. Willem Dafoe.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah. I remember that. They were all there. He tries to help them, and he talks around, and he loses.
Yeah. And he pretends he's on the other side, but then he isn't.
Yeah.
No, I think it was Dr. Octopus. I think William.
Oh,
William
yes.
Dafoe
Sorry.
is,
Yeah.
actually evil.
William Dafoe kills his aunt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Willem Dafoe is pretending to be
pretends to
recovering.
be good,
pretends to be Harry Osborn again.
Yeah.
But so this idea that Doc Ock could come around and be Peter's friend,
Yeah.
and ally in saving the lives of all of the other villains, even the one who isn't regretful for what he's done because he's still in that drug-induced psychotic state.
Yeah.
I love that. That's the model I think we should have for all of our heroic adventures. It isn't just that you beat the bad guy and go home.
It's
You
not
have a
black and white.
responsibility to the bad guy.
It's not black and white. And look, even Star Wars does that. You think Star Wars is the most black and white story ever. There's an evil empire and the good rebellion, but it's not. The empire is your father.
Yeah. And then even Kylo Ren at the end.
What?
Oh, let's not
Let's
go
not
there.
jump to those.
Let's
Let's
not go
let's
there.
stay. Let's stay.
Let's not bring new Star Wars.
Let's
into
stay
it.
in the original ones. But the point being, like,
No,
look,
it's
the
the
empire,
same
the baddie is your family. It is your family. It's you're like
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I am your father.
yeah.
As though anyone who
it-
has any knowledge of German didn't know that from the first movie on.
Well, it's like, but yeah, it's deeply profound in that way because we should all be friends. There you go.
Just dimensions. Just give characters dimensions.
I was trying to think of
stories
a smarter way to say things. But
stories that
ultimately, we're all human. Everyone loves their families. We all try to solve problems in different ways. Landing on a hippie message, but it is true.
Be better people.
Yeah, be good, be good. So everyone,
No.
we're going to wrap this one up, and we're going to wrap this one up, and we're going to end on: be nice, don't be a dick. Respect your elders. Learning is good.
Respect the youth as well.
Respect the youth too. Exactly.
Star Trek Beyond. That was the third one.
Sometimes things
No, it
need to
wasn't.
change.
They never happened.
Proceed with caution. With trying to drop as much knowledge as you can.
Don't mention Star Trek to John.
And disagree in a friendly way.
Oh,
There we go. Look at that.
it's all
Okay,
love.
everybody. Thank you again. I like to end on thanking you if you have listened this long. We really, really appreciate it. As always, as I've said each time, if you have any feedback or if you'd like to come on the show or if you have any topics for us, please do get in touch. None of you have done it so far, so I'm going to tell you this time, please do. And yes, thank you, Nicci, for being our first
Oh,
guest.
thanks for having me. Great fun.
Really
enjoyed it. Bring me back anything that could be relevant to discuss. Or things I can waffle on it, such as relevant.
Well, then you'd fit right in.
Yes, excellent. Okay, and thanks again, Jackie, for doing all the hard work.
Hey, Jackie. Oh, and thanks also to Robert Gordon University School of Computing for hosting us here and allowing us to have this kind of fun.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
I was just going to end. I've already got that clip. I'm just going to use that clip now.
Oh, man, here, I thought it was my turn to say it.
You can, or yeah,
I-
we'll edit.
Oh, well.
But I like it. I like it because you end with today's episode was brought to you by the.
Are you still using?
Yeah,
it?
I'm just using the clip of this episode was brought to you by and ending with your own time. Anyway, the show is.
Also, this is an interdisciplinary.
This is interdisciplinary.
This is interdisciplinary between.
This is now an interdisciplinary podcast
between different skills.
Jackie, you can cut it. We're SocTalk is a production from the Robert Gordon University School of Computing.
Today's episode was brought to you by the letter pi and the number pi.